Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our commencement ceremonies. I have the honor of introducing tonight's commencement speaker. Professional success usually occurs because of a variety of factors, including a good education, hard work, and some luck. Tonight, we are honored to have with us a person who has scaled the ladder to become one of the most successful medical leaders in Maryland. Dr. Romergryko Geocadin was born and raised in the Philippines. He received his medical degree from the University of the East Romergryko College of Medicine and subsequently completed both an internship in internal medicine and a residency in neurology at the New York University School of Medicine. He then became a fellow in neurological critical care at Johns Hopkins University. He was awarded the first Corporate Roundtable Fellowship Grant of the American Academy of Neurology and was selected to join the first AAN Palatucci Advocacy Leadership Program. Now an Associate Professor of Neurology, Neurosurgery, and Anesthesiology and Critical Care Medicine at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Geocadin was recently appointed as the Director of the Johns Hopkins Neurosciences Critical Care Unit. Dr. Geocadin's research includes laboratory, translational, and clinical investigations in brain injury and is supported by numerous grants from the National Institute of Health. Dr. Geocadin is well published in peer-reviewed journals, textbooks, and related medical publications and is a member of several prestigious organizations. It is my pleasure to welcome him to the podium tonight. Dr. Geocadin.
Thank you so much. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here. Chairman Slater, President Gottfried, it's actually a very interesting feeling having spoken to a lot of national, international congresses on scientific matters and to be asked to speak at a commencement exercise where I know that the impact of what I'm going to say probably has more in terms of the lives and potentially the direction of the graduates than addressing a 20,000 member College of Cardiology and talking about what to do with the brain and the heart. Half of them don't listen probably. But let me start by actually going with the script. My dear graduates and to the parents, families and friends, I congratulate you for this wonderful achievement. This is a major landmark. To the teachers and mentors, I too am a teacher and a mentor. Our deep gratitude for your time, dedication to make this happen and shape the future of our graduates. As I was trying to prepare this talk, I was struggling about what to say. As I said, I'm so used to giving technical talks. But then I scaled back and I say, I have to give this from the heart. And the best stories are really the stories that are our own. And the best lessons that we teach are the lessons that we actually learned ourselves firsthand. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you my story that spans 2 countries, 1 dreams, far too many tragedies, and far too many people saying that I could not do it. It started. How did it start? So it started with a teenager, a 14-year-old boy, left home because his mother died and his father turned to alcohol. This was a small seaside town in the Philippines. So this teenager went to the nearby city and actually volunteered to be a house servant. In the Philippines, we call them house boys. Essentially to do anything and everything for that family. In return for the roof and food and everything else, and the services, rather, in return for the services that he provided, he asked them to send him to school. So they sent him to school to finish high school. When he finished high school, he actually worked still in the family and said, can you continue to send me to a vocational school, a technical school, to be a secretary? So he did that, still with that family. And then when he finished that, he was ready to take his bachelor's. He became a secretary of a local Lions club. And in that club, he told them the same thing, the same deal. Send me to school, I will be your secretary. And to supplant his income, he became a fish vendor in the market. And then, as he was doing this, he became the student council president, and he finished law. The first time he took the Philippine bar exams, he failed because he ran out of money. He had to work to support himself because he ran out of money. The test was in Manila. He came back, but then he married, and the family that he married into was able to support him. And then his wife got pregnant in the process, but he passed the bar, and then the baby boy was born, and that was me. That is the story of my father. He became a corporate lawyer. He became a counselor in our city. He became the Lions District Governor, and he became the Lawyers League chairman of our state. Everybody told him it was not possible. Where do I come in? It was actually very interesting when he told me, when I asked him very early on, what did he expect of me? And he just said a simple thing that just struck me, which I thought was insurmountable. And he said, just make sure you're better than me. I said, where do I even start? And so it was actually really an interesting part growing. So I grew up in a middle-class family in the Philippines, but my dad really made sure that, I mean, we were not rich, but he sent me to the best schools, me and my brother and my sister, where all of the landlords, these big landlords, sent there because we come from an agricultural province. And in there, I saw how the rich lived, how they spoke English and Spanish. And by then, English became second nature to us. My dad spoke English and Spanish at the same time at home. So he always reminded us that it's hard work, but not really hard work. He used to stop me when I say, you have to work harder. And he said, no, too many people in the world work harder. You have to work smarter. And that is really the key thing, because everybody who works, harder, will just stay there. You have to figure out how to do it better. But the one thing also growing up was, I turned out to be a nerd. Back when it was not popular, I was bullied, yes. But then, you know that saying that, be careful who the nerd that you bully, because you might end up pumping gas on their car. Look where I'm now. And I'm very proud of it, because that is what I took. When I was sitting with some distinguished people on stage, they asked me what sport I played in high school. And I was so shy and ashamed, actually, to say that the only sport I played was chess. Because I was there on the math and science competing team for our school, for my school. So all of this went well until a major tragedy happened. My 7-year-old sister suddenly developed severe headaches, blurred vision, and difficulty walking. We couldn't figure out what she had. Nobody in our city knew, so we took her to the next island by boat to have a doctor seeing her. And in there was a surgeon who was trained in Manila who said she probably has brain tumor. And my sister was getting worse. There was no CT scan then. This was in the 1970s. In our province, there was one CT scan in the entire country of the Philippines, and it was in Manila. But during the time, this doctor said, and my sister was vomiting, she could barely stand up, she was 7 years old, and we were all crying. So he said, I have to do exploratory surgery to her brain, and I just want to diagnose this and figure out what it is. So my father and my mother said, go ahead, do it. But you know what he said? I'll only do it if you pay me. So, and this was my first lesson in compassion, or the lack of it. Because he wouldn't operate unless we give him something. So, and we couldn't come up with cash. So my dad gave him a land title as a collateral. The operation went. He just opened and saw a brain tumor and closed, and he said, it's too technical, you have to send this to Manila. My father was able to generate the money from his friends and family, and then when we came to redeem the title, he will not return it anymore. The money was 1/5 the cost of the land that was in the title. So that was my first, so this is how I actually learned what not to do as a doctor, which is actually sometimes a more powerful lesson when you see these life experiences. So I was dismayed. We brought my sister to Manila 4 surgeries later, and 1 year and 1 Christmas, she died of a medulloblastoma. I did not know the term then. But this changed my outlook from wanting to be like my dad, a lawyer, to be a brain doctor, to be able to help. So I started reading and reading and reading and anything, and I was so weird I was sleeping next to encyclopedias. No, I mean, seriously, my mom thought I was sick. Probably I am. But the sad thing about this too, and this goes back to the issues that hit us right now, my family actually went into a serious financial issue that we were bankrupt after that. But we recovered. But then we had to pick ourselves up, and now came college. So I was fortunate to go to the University of the Philippines, which was the best in the Philippines, and it offered me everything. So I was on track to be the best brain doctor that I can be. But what happens when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, and you're a member of a fraternity? What happens? I'm a normal guy. So from a dean's lister to a non-lister was what happened. So it was a half tragedy, really, because I almost had to leave the university. And my dad was furious. And so for me, the reason why I'm telling this is it doesn't have to be a straight arrow. It's how you pick yourself up. So I was devastated, and the devastation was I was so proud I did not get into the best medical school in the Philippines. I did not get into the best neurosurgical program in the Philippines. But there's a blessing there and a redirection. And what I've learned is sometimes you make wonderful mistakes. And that was a wonderful mistake. And how is that? That was because the university that I ended up with, University of the East Ramon Magsaysay, the dean was a neurologist who trained at the Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard, in 1965. And because I was the president of the student council, he and I became very good friends. And he became my mentor. In fact, he is my professional dad because he guided me with what I had to do. And he opened the doors of the Harvard alumni in neurology, because then I knew who were the people. But that will only get your pinky toe in, right? You have to prove yourself. It will get them to open your letter, but not necessarily to read it. So you have to do something more. So all of these things, and then he shaped the way I was thinking. But this is the important lesson too, that from the Philippines to the United States, you have to learn how a culture thinks and competes if you want to succeed. You cannot just be the smartest in the Philippines and believe that you will be the smartest here. There are nuances that you have to learn, and you have to know which mentor can help you do that. And that is the key thing that shaped me, because otherwise I would have fell flat, because many of my classmates did that. The way smarter people with the absence of mentorship. Onto the new land. Amazingly, we took the test, made it, and passed. Right after my internship, I was lucky to have the opportunity to really come here. But it was actually an interesting time during that, because we were applying from Manila. And this is actually an interesting thing about looking for jobs, because from Manila, I mailed 500 applications to the universities here in the United States. That was a real fortune, because it has to be stamped and everything, and it was this thick, the packet. And Guess how many replied to me? 10. 10 replied back, but that was enough for the U.S. Embassy in Manila to give me a visa for an interview, which is even harder than anything. So we got it, and then we came here in the United States. But it was amazing then because of the dean. All of my letters, everything was fashioned in a way that an American student would do it. And that's probably why I got 10 and not 0. So, but that's how sometimes you have to know that it's not really just what you read. You have to know the nuance of the culture and how to adapt and how to really operate in the real world to be competitive. So, yes, the process was uphill, but it pays to think and try to compete in this very similar playing field that the other competitors are in. It's very important. And then we arrived in the United States. There was even a funny story about my jacket because that was the thickest jacket that I found in the Philippines. And we came here in December 31, 1996. And you know how that feels. And that's when I realized that my jacket was a spring jacket. We arrived in Staten Island in New York, and we were taken in by this family of our classmate who we don't know. And this is the next big message that I would like to put across, is the concept and the spirit of community. We didn't know these people. We just had our classmate who was a cousin of one of these people, and they were not rich. So these were like recent immigrants, blue-collar jobs, delivery men, flower shop helpers, clerks. But they took us in, and you know what they said? We know that you have limited funds. We have to stay in the United States for 4 months for interviews and everything. And they never allowed us to pay for anything. We were moving from one house to the other in this big extended family, and they took us in. We didn't spend a single penny on food, on rent, on anything for 4 months. And even beer and good times were had with them, which was fascinating. But then the amazing part came when the 4 of us, me and my fiancée, who's my wife now, and then 2 of our other classmates, we all became specialists. The 4 of us, so me at Johns Hopkins, my wife trained in Columbia, who's now a psychiatrist at Shepherd Pratt. The other guy with us is now an open heart surgeon, and the other lady is now a pediatrician. We came back to this family 6 years later and said, we really owe you big time. We want to help you. How can we do that? We were ready to give a check to support their kids for school. They screamed and were mad at us because they said that was not our intent. We helped you because it was coming out of our hearts. We did not expect anything. And you know what they told us? If you really want to do it, pay it forward. So any person who comes, who needs help, who just moved to the United States from where we are, take them in as we took you in. So it was really, so it took a community. So where I am is a combination of a lot of things that I couldn't even put together well without really getting, emotional. But that is the next thing, okay? And then the next big part of this story is now I have to apply. Because I was an ambitious person, I applied to I came from the best schools in the Philippines, so I also applied to the best schools here in the United States. Guess what? They didn't even open my application because I'm a foreigner. I called them and they said, what school did you graduate? University of the East. Where is that? So it was really difficult, but for every door that is shut, there's always a window and maybe a small crack that is available. Interestingly, this was early 1990s, New York City, height of AIDS, HIV. Nobody wanted to be in many hospitals in urban New York City. So there was an opening at the Manhattan VA. where I got in, which was a sister hospital of NYU. And because of that, I was able to take training at the New York University and was able to do well enough to get into the program and get into the residency course there. So that's how that thing happened. And because of that entry into NYU, I thought that I have equal footing now. I am in a real well-calibered school. No, I had an accent. They still know that I'm from the Philippines. The residents from the IVs were not really happy when they take my sign out because they really didn't know me. They didn't train with me. So this is when I realized that I always have to not only hit the mark, but go higher than the mark, which was my real motivation. But guess what? It did so much good to me that I just not have to get X, but X plus. It was hard. It was not easy. But then after a while, when you train yourself to think and do this, it becomes second nature. So at the end of residency, so that was again the interesting competition there. At the end of residency, I had to make a decision on what subspecialty I want to go in. And this again, for the graduates, you have to see, do you go with the traditional or do you go with the riskier one? As the student speaker said, or somebody said, take risk, right? Take risk. I took risk. I went for a subspecialty that was not popular. It was neurocritical care, neurointensive care. When people ask me what is neurointensive care, what is it? When the brain hits the fan, I am the doctor they call to pick the brain up and put it together again. So what that means is when you have a big stroke, a big tumor, a big trauma, everything, when survival after the injury is 5, 10, 20, 30%, and you end up in the neuro ICU, that's what I do. And that's the only thing I do. I only work in the ICU. And people were scared. And the field at the time was just starting. There were only 4 programs: Johns Hopkins, Harvard, UVA, and Columbia. And I got into Hopkins. How I got into Hopkins was yet another story. Because then they were only taking people who would do a rotation with them. And what that rotation is really an audition. But then I realized a lot of other things. And I'm about to end this and to transition, because this is where I put the big lessons. When I got to Hopkins, this is where it all started to put together, because now I can relax. And the one thing that reminded me was, of all the life stories and the big stories, was what Professor Dan Hanley, who really trained me, is the father of my specialty, said that, and because during the time when I was training, every time he asked me a question, I would say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And then what he told me, very good. Then I said, how did I get a very good for saying I don't know? The faculty is right here. You know that when you ask students, they always try to come up with answers, right? But sometimes, especially when it comes to lives, it's better to say you don't know, because it will give you a time to step back, rethink, and read. If you try to make things up, you are likely to make a big mistake. So it is very important. That was the first lesson Dan Hanley told me. But when you tell families you don't know, you have to reassure them that you will do everything to find the possible answer. But that is also the opening to research, because that is the only time that you can do real research, when you recognize that you do not know and you make the right questions. When you pretend to know, your questions is colored, and the trajectory of your research will be like the Hindenburg. It will crash and burn, and you don't even know why. And it is very important. The other big thing that I learned from Hopkins is the ability to see the opportunities and things that seem so barren. And this is where you need a mentor. When I was starting out in my research, Dan again came to me and said, Romer, I want you to look at brain injury and cardiac arrest. And then I said, Dan, but there's nothing there. Nothing is published. There's probably only 4 people in the entire world working in that area. Dan said, precisely. And I said, why? And then he said, if you do research in an area where nobody knows, anything you find is a publication. 35 papers later, he is correct. But you know what that set me up to? Because the field there was very few people there. We knew each other. And as the field was picking up, now you hear all of these stories about hypothermia, freezing the brain. And that is really what I'm doing. And my research is in coma. How do you protect the brain after it's down? And you freeze them and thaw them and let them recover. Before these things happened, there was nobody there. As the science was sweeping up, I was actually the youngest chair in the American Academy to chair the course in this area because there was nobody there. So I guess the important lesson there is when there's a line for opportunities in research, avoid the longest line. Go with the shortest line or the no line. Then you make your own line. I'm almost done, I promise. But what this thing also, the research in cardiac arrest taught me was the thing that one of my professors in the Philippines taught me. And she said, she's like the dragon lady in our university. And she said, I don't care if you're from Hopkins. If your research is so highfalutin that it doesn't even matter to my patients here, I don't know you. So that's a big challenge, right? When I'm practicing with like $1 million worth of technology in one room, how do you translate that to a third world country? And then therapeutic hypothermia came along. You arrest, we resuscitate you, and while you're comatose, we pack you in ice. How much is a pack of ice? In Canada, they don't have high-tech machines. They just open their windows. I was there because we were in this big consortium, and we were talking about this. But the amazing part here is what you really need, and we have nursing graduates here, and there's a huge opportunity in this kinds of research that would impact nursing and caregiving. But this is something that you can apply to countries like the Philippines. And so that is really what I'm really trying to do, and not just to translate from the lab to the bench, but to make sure that what we do here is applicable to places where I was born. And so that is really taking now everything in full circle, and in closing, I would just like to put everything together. And my story, which started with a boy who left home to be a servant and a young man in a new country struggling with all doors closed, this is not really a different story or a totally off-the-hook story that you guys have not heard of. If you are starting, I want you to take this and say, the world is yours. The opportunities are there. I believe that the preparation that you have here, the opportunities that you were given here at College of Southern Maryland, will ensure you a promising future. With that, to be able to see the start of something wonderful, knowing that you are ready if the road will not be easy and nice. It's like what happened to me. It's not always easy and nice, but you have to be ready to see the challenges and tackle them and define for you the opportunities and successes in the future, because sometimes you don't really see them, but they're there. You just have to either take a different angle or step back even, and not necessarily forward, to see the opportunities. To contribute the best you can, not just for you personally and for your personal returns, but for the good of many. And this is what I do with teaching, with research, and with still staying in academia. And to have the kindness of spirit and the willingness to be part of a greater community and to serve. And with that, I congratulate all of you, and I'm so happy to be here and to share my little story. Thank you so much.
Dr. Geocadin, that was very inspirational, and we certainly benefit from the passion that you've shown and the great success that you enjoyed in life through very hard work. And thank you for being a new friend to the College of Southern Maryland. We're honored to have such a distinguished surgeon join us from Johns Hopkins University. And in that regard, we have a small token of our appreciation.